So guys, in this video, our Ornament Girl designer Monica is going to take you through so many amazing ideas for making fillable keepsake wedding ornaments. You're going to love everything that she's got to share. However, she shared a ton in this video. So what we've done is made you this really awesome little keepsake ornament planner sheets. You can download it, print it out. This is going to help you plan out any kind of colors, themes that you want to do for your ornament, and then give you a big huge list here of all the different supplies and things that you may want to consider using. You don't have to use all of them, but you can take a look and that'll help spark your ideas, get your creative juices flowing. And then of course at the end there's some blank spaces for you to add anything else that you might need that wasn't listed. Alrighty, so I hope that you love all the ideas that you're about to see. Happy ornamenting.
Hello everybody, today we are going to talk about wedding invitation ornaments. One of the things I really love about Christmas ornaments is how they become special mementos from year to year as you pull them out and place them on your tree. And something special that you can do for a couple who invites you to their wedding, or maybe with your own wedding invitations, you can create something small that you pull out each year and hang it on your tree just as a little reminder of your special day. So stick around and I'm going to give you some tips and ideas on things that you can do to make your own wedding invitation ornament. First things first, you're going to need a clear ornament. So these are two that I found last Christmas. I found several of these 3-inch ones at Walmart and a little larger size at Michael's. Around the holidays, you can find them all over the place. You may want to reconsider using glass if these are something that may get broken. If you're going to have them around children or pets, you may want to consider using acrylic instead of glass. I found this one last year at Michael's and it has a bit of an iridescence to it. And keep in mind, it may scratch a little easier than the glass ones, but it certainly is not going to be quite as dangerous if it drops on the ground. So this is really beautiful. I love that iridescence, that little rainbow shimmer that it has to it. Last year, I found this shape. It's kind of like an onion. It's a very fancy looking shape. I found these at Joann, and I love the stopper on these. It's actually a little larger stopper than normal. So the larger hole means that you can place larger things inside. I also found this disc shape at Joann last year, which is really nice. Another version of acrylic ornaments that I love are the ones that come in 2 pieces, because that gives you so much space where you can fit larger items, larger mementos from the wedding, and be able to close it up. The heart shape is also one that I've found very useful for wedding invitation ornaments. Let's talk about what you can fill them with. Take a look at the invitation and see what theme or tone the bride and groom are wanting to try to get across with their wedding invitation. Sometimes different items like the ribbons or the emblems or the envelope will give you a cue as to what types of things should be included or colors can be included in the ornament that you make for them. Something else I wanted to mention, if the wedding happened many years ago, maybe like me, these are things from my wedding from 20 years ago, if you've just had them stuffed in a keepsake box somewhere, this could be a great time to bring them out and use them in an ornament along with the wedding invitation, or maybe you don't have the invitation and you just have small items from the wedding. Or if you're going to be attending the wedding, some things that you can maybe keep in mind are other things you could pick up at the wedding or keep that you can incorporate into the ornament, such as if there's a program. For instance, this one at my wedding, we used some ribbon. That's certainly something, the ribbon could be reused. Even the paper from the program could be used in the ornament. The favor boxes, we had tulle inside of them and ribbon on the outside and even a little piece of paper that had our name on the outside. Here's a butterfly that was in my bouquet and some beads. I actually used these beads in my wedding invitation. This was my wedding invitation. We rolled it up like a scroll, tied some ribbon around it, and put some beads inside of it and mailed it in these clear containers. So I guess you could say this was my first wedding invitation ornament right here. Some great ideas to keep in mind, even things like bubbles. If you have something that has just this cheaper ribbon on there, you could certainly take that ribbon off and just toss it into the ornament. While we're on the subject of saving things from the wedding and the reception and the decorations, I wanted to throw this in there as another option. If you have something that is larger pieces of fabric or ribbon or maybe tablecloths, table overlays, and things like that, you might go ahead and keep some of those because you can make no-sew fabric ornaments out of those. For instance, this is a no-sew ornament. This is the parasol pattern that's available on the Ornament Girl website. And I made this using this one napkin style table overlay. It was about 22 inches square, and it's just that cheap cotton type of fabric, so it's not very fancy. But when I used it to make this ornament, boy, it really bumped it up a notch. And this is such a nicer keepsake than just this flat napkin type of thing that the bride would just have sitting in a keepsake box somewhere. So now she can hang this on her tree every Christmas and remember her wedding. It doesn't really take a whole lot of fabric to create a beautiful no-sew ornament. Kimikomi style ornaments are great because they don't really require a lot of fabric, but they really give you beautiful results. In fact, this one here on the left, this is based on the Moonlight pattern, which is available as a free download on the Ornament Girl website, so make sure you get that. This is the Elements pattern here on the right, and it has that beautiful swirl. This is also available on the Ornament Girl website. But as you can see, it doesn't take a lot of fabric coverage, but boy, it sure is beautiful when it's all said and done. There are also many other no-sew patterns that are available on the Ornament Girl website. Some of them, like this one, this is the Rosebud pattern, which is a little more advanced, but it does not take really large pieces of fabric. So you can really get away with using some very small strips of fabric to create such a beautiful ornament. Probably one of the first things we all think about when we think about decorations at a wedding are the flowers. So once you go into a craft store, you know, there are so many options. You're bound to find something, whether it's a scrapbooking embellishment or paper flowers or silk flowers, floral picks. Something is bound to catch your eye that will be a great addition to your ornament. As you can probably tell, I really am not much of a minimalist when it comes to wedding invitation ornaments. I kind of like to think of them as like a potpourri that I'm putting together inside of that ornament. Beads are just a really nice economical way to add some sparkle and a little extra something special to the ornament. I really like to vary the sizes of the beads that I do. I'll often use 2 different sizes of beads in an ornament just so that there's some variety. In fact, if I'm using a bunch of small beads, often I will use a couple of chunky beads in there as well. It's just nice to see something that's a little larger in there instead of just the beads that are sitting at the bottom. Other items in addition to beads that you could possibly use are, of course, sequins. And buttons are also fun. These are shank buttons that are just decorative items that you would use for scrapbooking and other type of crafts. And then other types of embellishments as well. These are adhesive embellishments, and you wouldn't want the back side of these showing. What I will often do on these types of things is I'll take 2 and just put them together so that no matter which side you see, it's always pretty. Other things you can incorporate into the ornament are things like little bits of lace or tulle, maybe something that was actually used in the wedding favors or something like that. Now, sometimes you may have bits of ribbon, but there doesn't really seem to be enough to make an actual bow, like for the top of the ornament. So another way that I like to use these little bits of ribbon is to cut them up into smaller pieces and just make smaller bows out of them, or just tie them in a simple little knot. Here's another one. Just having that knot in the middle and cutting those ends at a little bit of an angle, it really adds a little something. When I begin to slice up the wedding invitation, the first thing I focus on, of course, are the words. And usually it's just a matter of slicing them into strips, and I make sure that I do them not too wide because you do want them to be able to fit into the ornament. Sometimes with more modern type of wedding invitations, the names or the words are really large, and so it's a little harder. If that's the case, you know, you're going to have to decide what is the most important word. Is there something that you can slice, or do you need to use a larger ornament that is in 2 pieces so that you can fit it inside? So once that's taken care of, then you can move on to using all those other little pieces that are left. So that includes the envelope, and maybe there was an outer wrapper, and maybe the edges of the actual invitation that you needed to trim off. You can use those. All of that is fair game. And you can create things like paper spirals or little paper beads like this, you know, going back to your elementary school years in art. And I really love to do confetti. So you can use a paper punch, or maybe you have a paper cutter. That is a lot of fun to fill the rest of your ornament with the rest of the invitation or the envelope, and yet they can still see and catch a glimpse of the words through the ornament. Since I so often work with fabric, I'm very used to working with an acrylic ruler and a cutting mat and a rotary cutter. Now, you don't have to use these. You could use something like a work mat and some sort of a ruler and an X-Acto knife. That would work fine, but I just happen to have these. This is a rotary cutter that I used to use for fabric, but the blade is really dull, so I don't use it for fabric anymore. And I happen to have this small cutting mat and an acrylic ruler. So like I said, you can use anything you have that's comparable. Whatever you feel like is going to give you a really nice cut without jagged edges, that is really preferable. And here is the first one that I'm going to work on. So you'll notice that most of the words are confined here to the center, and I really like the fact that I'm going to be able to use those outer edges, especially because there is a print on the back side of this invitation. So I want to preserve those edges. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and slice those edges off first, and that way all I'm working with is just this center area. All right, so I got those edges off. I did some in straight lines and I did some at an angle, and so we'll figure out what to do with these here in a bit. In the meantime, let's go ahead and slice this up, and I want to just do the main words and then do smaller slices of the details here. In fact, those smaller words are really small, and I'd like to kind of group them together. So I'll probably group them, the first two, that is the date, and then the time maybe by itself, and then the final two here that are small by themselves, and then do this part here on its own, the little cursive down at the bottom. All right, so here are all the pieces. I'm actually going to do another one that's a different style so you can see that as well. So as you can see, this one is quite a bit different. This is actually just a save the date card. But it's really cute with this photo here, and something that I like about it, it does have some large fonts there. So instead of just slicing and dicing, I kind of want to preserve some of the elements on here, including their photograph. I think I want to put them in a heart. So I have this large heart punch right here. Now the heart does not quite reach all the way up to their faces, so I am going to have to do some trimming along the bottom in order to get my heart in just the right spot. All right, that took care of the bottom. Let's see if they fit a little better inside this punch. Oh, that is perfect. So I can center them, which looks a little strange to me. I think I'm going to go ahead and offset them just a bit. But if I offset them too much, it's going to get over here into the words. So maybe I'll angle it just a little bit down. That's cute. It kind of actually gets her feet in there. So now I can place that inside the ornament. What a cute little addition. And I will also go ahead and do some slicing and dicing of the rest of their ornament, trying to preserve some of the elements here. All right, I have used up most of this save the date card, and now let's talk about how to make those spirals and the beads. I've cut some additional pieces of paper from a wedding invitation envelope that I received. I also cut some regular scrapbook paper. Scrapbook paper is a really great way to incorporate some extra color into the ornament, especially if the wedding invitation that you get does not have much color. If you can go off of the colors that are shown in the invitation, or maybe if you just know what the wedding colors are going to be, you can just get some cardstock or some scrapbook paper that coordinates with those colors and cut it up just like you would for the actual wedding invitation, slicing it into pieces that are long strips or triangle type shapes that we can turn into beads and spirals. In addition to the paper strips that you've cut, I find some of these type of supplies very helpful. I like to use bamboo skewers because they're long and they're larger than, say, like a toothpick, which is often a tool that is used when people are making paper beads. When you're dealing with that thicker paper, it's really helpful to find something to use to wrap it around that is a little more sturdy and just a little longer. So see what you have around the house. It could even be like this, like a paintbrush, and you could use, the handle of it, or a pencil, anything like that that's round. It doesn't have to be fancy, just utilitarian. I also find that just regular glue, either glue stick or regular water-soluble glue like an Elmer's glue, works great. Just something to make sure the paper sticks together when you want it to. And then I find these little clips handy. I found these just one day at a store one day. So anything that you can find that will help clip it to the bamboo skewer so it doesn't move around. So clips, and also this is optional, but I really like to cover my beads and my paper spirals with Mod Podge, because it really gives a nice sheen and it helps hold the shape a little better. Now, your beads and your paper spirals are going to need somewhere to dry. So I like to also have a piece of styrofoam. This is just some packing material that I had in a box from something I bought. And I like to use it with my bamboo skewers, once I have my paper wrapped around it, I'll just stick it down into the styrofoam so that it can dry without touching. If you don't have some sort of styrofoam, you could just use a cup or anything that you could place the skewers down into so that they will stay upright as the glue dries or as the Mod Podge dries. One thing I wanted to mention is when you are working with this really thick paper, it's going to be really hard to turn these into beads or to wrap them really tightly, because you're going to end up sort of almost breaking it, because it's almost more like a chipboard. I will just curl them. In fact, you probably can't see it because of the glare, but here's an ornament I made, and all of the pieces in there were this very, very heavy, thick stock paper. I wanted them to be able to sort of curl along with the shape of the ornament itself, so I just curled them a little bit. And that is really easy to do. All you need to do is take your stick or your pencil or whatever you're using, and you have to work a little bit patiently. You don't want to just do this all at once because you're trying to coax it into a little bit of a curled shape, rubbing it right up against that bamboo skewer. Eventually it's going to start kind of curling with the shape. So now it is a nice curved shape, and when I place it inside an ornament, it's just going to sit in there and I'll still be able to read the words. I will curve some of them inward and I'll curve some of them outward. Varying the direction of your curls is another tip. And sometimes you'll have pieces like this where it's really not enough to be an actual bead. And I'll do the same thing as I did with those long strips. I'll just curl it around so it has a little bit more personality. And sometimes I'll curl one side one way, and when I flip it around to the other corner, I'll curl it the other way, and that gives it, once again, just a little extra personality. There's no one particular way. I just suggest you have fun and play with it. So now let's talk about how to do the beads. I'm going to start here at the thick end. So first you need to decide which side do you want to show on your bead. This is going to be the outside of my bead. So I'm going to put that away from me. And I'm taking my little skewer here, and I'm going to start curling the end of it. And once I have it going, you can actually put a little dab of glue there if you want. I'm just going to hold it with my finger. You want to do it enough so that it will start curving all the way around, once around your skewer. And then hold it, and then just begin to roll it, roll it, roll it. Once you get started, go ahead and take your glue or your glue stick and add just a little bit, and that's going to hold on to the paper as you roll it. As you get to the end, hopefully that glue is going to hold. If not, use whatever you have available, and that can help hold it in place while that glue dries. So I'm going to let the glue dry on this one and show you how to do those paper spirals. You're going to need something a little longer, like a bamboo skewer or a pencil, in order to do the paper spirals so that it can wrap all the way down. Now, I like to do it this way. There's probably multiple ways you can do it, but I like to start in the middle. I just feel like it's a little easier to hold on to the paper instead of working with the little end. That can be a little fussy. So I start in the middle and just tilt it at an angle, and then just begin wrapping it one way and the other. And when you do that first wrap, you'll get a feel for how far apart they are. I like to keep them pretty close together. I'm going to keep it nice and tight against this bamboo skewer. I'm going to go ahead and do the other end. One thing I forgot to mention is as you create your spirals, don't overlap the paper at all so that you get as much length out of it as you can. So these are both ready to be Mod Podged. You want your paper to be completely covered with Mod Podge. You don't want it too goopy because it'll take forever to dry, but definitely make sure that all of it is covered. So this is when I like to stand mine up in this styrofoam. I'm just going to stand it right there. I'd mentioned when I did those spirals that you shouldn't allow the paper to overlap, but sometimes you might come across something like this where I started this as a bead. It was just all going to be right on top of each other. And then as I wrapped it, I realized that I did want some of these elements to show, some letters and some of the gold. So I kind of did a combination bead slash spiral where it starts as a bead here where it's overlapping, and then I just wrapped it down and kind of pulled it apart a little bit as I wrapped it so that more of the elements could be shown. So you might find as you wrap yours that you do want some of them to be sort of a combination bead slash spiral, and it can really give you some very interesting, neat looking results. When I Mod Podge beads, you can see that I removed this clip. It's no longer necessary because the glue has dried, so it's holding really well. And I'll just take that clip and place it below the bead. That way, as I work and I'm placing the Mod Podge on the bead, it's not slipping around, and it's also not getting all over my fingers. And once the Mod Podge is on my bead, I can either go ahead and stand this up in the styrofoam, or another thing I like to do, I will place some pins just standing up in the styrofoam. You can see those little pins there. And I'll just turn my bamboo skewer over so that the bead will fall out. And if I need to give it a little push, I will. And it stands straight up. It's not going to adhere to the foam or whatever my work surface is. After your Mod Podge has set just a little bit on your spirals, you're going to want to remove the clips or whatever you have holding it, because if you don't remove it at some point off of the skewer, it's going to try to adhere to the skewer permanently. You have to work a little carefully, and you might get some Mod Podge on your fingers, but start twisting your skewer just a little bit and working it. You can see I'm kind of almost peeling it off the skewer. All right, so my spiral is loose. Maybe a little too loose now. I definitely want it to have that same shape that I had before. It's a little wet up here from the Mod Podge, so I'm going to come down here on the other part of my skewer where it's sort of dry. There's no Mod Podge on it. And I'm going to twist my spiral again. So when you need to dry it, you definitely want to dry it on something either like another long pin, or you can take another skewer that doesn't have any Mod Podge on it at all. So I'll just slip it down on a dry bamboo skewer or a pin, and once again place a clip down at the bottom so that it doesn't slide all the way down. So eventually all your beads and your spirals will dry, and you can begin placing them in your ornament. As I'm filling the ornaments, I'm trying to pay attention to exactly how full it's going to be, especially these ones where you're working with only 1/2 and filling it. So you want it to be full where it looks like it's something, spectacular in there, but you don't want it so full that it's hard for people to see what it is. So if it's really stuffed full, then people are not really going to have the fun of moving it around, turning it around, and catching a glimpse of the different words that are on there. Fill it however full you think it can be so that it's still somewhat readable as they move it around. Now, when you place these two halves together, typically these will stay together pretty well, but if you're concerned about it, then I highly suggest that you go ahead and put just a little bit of glue on there. This is the glue I like to use, E6000, because it's an industrial strength glue. But another thing you can do is to use the same glue, but you can add some trim once you close it, and that does seem to give that seam just a little extra security, because you really don't want this to ever come apart and then all the little pieces go everywhere, especially if you have something in there like sand or some kind of a filler that's very fine. You don't want that all over the place. As I mentioned, I really like to use E6000, but you are certainly welcome to use whatever glue you like. I just like this because it is so strong. Now, it does take 24 hours to cure, so you will want to make sure that when you are done gluing your ornament together that you set it aside and let it set for the entire length of time so that you know that it's not going to come apart. I find that personally, I really like to use a small paintbrush, especially one that it doesn't matter, like it's not expensive. So you have to work kind of carefully because you don't want to dump the stuff out. And I guess you could go ahead and put the glue on and then fill it, but I feel like that's kind of a risk because I don't want to bump the glue after I do this. So I'll speed up the video, but I'm going to go ahead and just go all along this little inner ridge. Now, you don't want to overdo it. If you add too much glue, then it's going to squish out when these two pieces are put together. And you don't really want a bunch of glue just dripping everywhere on the outside and especially on the inside, because if it's dripping here on the inside, all those things you placed inside your ornament, they might stick to the glue, and you don't want that. And now I'm going to have to work on the inside because this is the part of the ornament that is going to cover the other side. So just be aware, whatever you're working on, you need to be working on the correct side. So I can feel the little ridge here. So that's where I'm going to be working. Right above that ridge is where I'm going to put the glue. So there we go. Both pieces have glue on them and they've set for just a minute. And now I'm going to put them together carefully, making sure that nothing you've placed on the inside of the ornament gets caught. Mine seems to be pretty clean. There's nothing squishing out the side, and I'm not going to be moving this around yet because just in case some of that glue squished into the inside, and I'm going to let it cure just like this for 24 hours. Once your glue that's holding the seam together has dried, or if you didn't use glue and you're just ready to move on, Then you need to decide if you want that seam on your acrylic ornament to be covered or if you just want to leave it as is. You have so many options. You can just use ribbon. You could certainly use like a glue gun or something to place trim right around that seam. There are so many beautiful trims that you could choose from. I think today I'm going to do something just a little different. I'm going to use adhesive rhinestones. Now these are some type of rhinestones or pearl beads, something like that, that are flat on the back and already have an adhesive on the back. And I will tell you that often these don't stay long term. They tend to just let go after a while. So if you're concerned about them letting go over time, you might want to go ahead and place some extra glue underneath. Today I'm going to just demonstrate without extra glue, but you could certainly add glue if you feel that it's necessary. That is a really nice addition to this ornament. So now let's talk about other finishing touches like hangers and bows and other rhinestone embellishments. The finishing touches on your ornament can be as simple or as streamlined or as elaborate as you'd like. Sometimes all you need is just to tie a pretty ribbon onto the hanger loop and you're good to go. Or you can create a simple hanger with a narrow ribbon or a string and then create a more decorative bow using a wider ribbon. You can make a bow simply by creating 2 loops, crisscrossing them and tying them into a knot, and then adjust and tighten and fluff the bow loops until they sit just like you want. I like to create nice little dovetails on the ends of my ribbon by folding it in half and cutting it at an angle. So pretty. A little dab of hot glue on the ornament helps hold it in place. Sometimes a metal topper or a lid that originally came with the ornament needs a little bit of a makeover. Like this ornament here, I really did not want the silver topper because the actual ornament is filled with gold beads. So I used Mod Podge. I like to use the glitter extreme version, but use whatever glue or sealer you like best. So I slide out the metal hook a bit, not all the way, most of the way, and that acts like a handle that I can hold as I paint the Mod Podge all over the topper. And when it's completely covered on the outside, then I cover it with extra fine glitter and then let it dry. And then later I seal it with a second coat and let it dry again. And when it's finished, you can just push the hook back down into place, or you can remove it all together and create your own. If the holes aren't big enough for whatever you're wanting to thread through them, just use a tool from your craft supplies to make them a little larger. Sometimes that metal is really soft and you can just push right through it. And I really like to add beads to my toppers, so I'll often use a chunky bead and just thread some string or very narrow ribbon through it, being sure that I tie a knot right above the bead so that it doesn't slide off later, and then threading it through the topper and tying it in a nice tight knot on the underside. And usually I'll take my hot glue gun and add just a dab of glue on that underside, especially if my ornament is going to have very tiny beads or something like sand in it, because I don't want that to escape from the topper. So the problem to overcome now, if you don't have that hook that the topper originally came with, is that you need some way to adhere that topper to the top of your ornament. So I like to use a very strong industrial glue, and to prep my ornament for the glue, I like to take sandpaper and just rough up that area where the topper is going to be. It doesn't take much. You just want to scuff up that area where the topper is going to sit. It's going to give that adhesive or glue something to grab onto. And my favorite glue to use is E6000. I really wouldn't recommend hot glue if your ornament is really heavy, but use whatever you're comfortable with. Just make sure that if you're using E6000 or any other type of glue that you read the instructions and you know how long it's supposed to sit and cure. So as I add the glue, I pay special attention to right where the rim of my ornament is going to press against the topper. So I definitely pay attention to the sides as well. And I also add some to the ornament itself, just using a toothpick or some other tool right around that area that I scuffed up. And once both pieces have glue on them, then I put them together. You definitely want it to cure the full amount of time before you try hanging your ornament, especially if your ornament is heavy with beads in it. You don't want it coming apart. So E6000 takes 24 hours, so I'm going to set this aside and not try to hang it until those 24 hours have passed by. If you have jewelry supplies, you can also create beaded hangers using those. I like to remove the hook, and then I'll use a head pin, which is basically just a straight pin that doesn't have a sharp end. You might need something on the underside to make sure that head pin doesn't just slip right through the topper. Here I'm using a bead cap, and then placing my bead on the top, and then using jewelry pliers, I'm just creating a small loop. And now I can place a hanger right on the loop. And once again, I like to seal that bottom part of the topper with a glue gun just in case there's something like tiny beads or grains of something that I don't want slipping through the top of my ornament. Beautiful. Putting rhinestones on the outside of your ornament is another great way to add some pretty detail. And you can do this in a few different ways. As I mentioned before, you can get these types of rhinestones that already have the adhesive on the back, and all you have to do is just peel them and stick them where you want them, like I did here on this one. Sometimes these pre-adhesive type of rhinestones, they don't adhere long-term very well. Sometimes you'll notice that they'll start popping off, so you might want to add a little bit of glue underneath them in addition to what is already on there. I definitely recommend the E6000 for that. I use the E6000 for single rhinestones that don't have any type of adhesive backing on them as well. I'll just take something pointy like a toothpick or the end of a paintbrush and dip it in the E6000 and just place a dot wherever I want my rhinestone to be. And then take some tweezers like these and pick up my rhinestone and place it right on that dot of glue and just press it just for a moment till it adheres. And once it sticks, remember it will need a full 24 hours to cure completely. Another rhinestone option that I recently started using for various projects, especially fabric, are hot fix rhinestones. So these types of rhinestones have a type of adhesive on the back that is activated when it comes into contact with high heat. So you would use a hot fix applicator in order to adhere these rhinestones to your ornament. So here's a hot fix applicator for rhinestones. Now make sure you're using the correct tip for the correct size of hot fix rhinestones. And once again, make sure you are using the right types of rhinestones that do have that hot fix type of glue on the back. What I like to do is to place my rhinestone exactly where I want it on my ornament. So I would place it right here. And once your rhinestone is in place, then take your hot fix applicator, being very, very careful not to touch anything but the rhinestone because it is very, very hot. And you especially would need to be careful if you're working with an acrylic type of ornament because this is so hot it will melt your acrylic. So I actually don't recommend this method for acrylic, but it just happens to be what I had to demonstrate with. So place it right down on your rhinestone with gentle pressure. It just takes about 10 seconds or so to melt that glue on the back. If you go too long or you press too hard, it's going to melt right through your acrylic. So you wouldn't want to do that. Now you don't have that problem if you're working with glass. So 10 to 15 seconds is just about the right amount of time to set those rhinestones in place. And it really adds some beautiful sparkle to your finished ornament. And last but not least, I wanted to mention charms because charms are a really nice finishing touch on your ornament too. So you can maybe create them with beads from the wedding, or maybe you can make a personalized charm from the couple's photo together and dangle it down, or you can just take a heart and slip it either onto the ribbon or whatever hanger it is, and it is one additional element to the ornament that is beautiful. I hope you found these tips helpful and that they have inspired you to create an ornament of your own. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and please visit the Ornament Girl website for a lot more ornament ideas, inspiration, and patterns. Happy ornamenting. Bye.